What is up, guys? It is me, Little Al, back again with another reaction. How are we all doing today? I am feeling fan-dabby-dozy. Thank you very much for asking, you little internet peoples. Not sure if you cared or not, but there you go. That's how I feel. But anyway, I am hyped for today's reaction because I am finally getting back into another Unlucky Tugs episode. He's not really doing a series. Well, it's the beginning of a new series that I hope to do a reaction to. But it's been way too long since I've done an Unlucky Tug video. The last one I did, I think it was the first one I did, was the Eppleton, the Voyage of Eppleton Hall, and that was so freaking fascinating. It was such a fascinating video, such a fascinating watch, because I'd never heard of Eppleton Hall before I watched that. Like seriously, and it was just, it was just so interesting seeing, just like not only again something new, but also it made me realize, re-realize kind of why I love vehicles and kind of trains and things. It's because there's just so much personality to them, and you know, it kind of gave me a second spark in a way. For getting back into kind of getting back into rail fanning, certainly. And this one is a little bit different. It's not exactly the same, but it is it is something that I think is going to be interesting. So it is it's a retrospective on season 1 of Thomas and Friends. I don't really have an opinion on season 1, if I'm totally honest, and maybe this will sway my opinion to some extent. But really, what I think it is I think as a starting point, it's really good, and I think it just shows, it's like, in a good way, it shows how far the series has gone. The series just kept improving constantly, like in terms of like quality and just storytelling. It just got so much better as it came along, and season 1, considering like what it started from, like season 1, it's a damn good start for any kind of kid show. Granted, the kind of writing was already there because obviously it was based off the Reverend W. Awdry's books, so they didn't necessarily have to they had to adapt a few lines, especially for the American dubs. But there wasn't really that much kind of story. Like the good writing, the clever writing of the Railway series was already there. But I think the visuals, certainly, they added a new element to this season. And also, season 1 has, we're gonna get into it a bit later, but season 1 has so many bangers. Like, just in terms of episodes, it has so many just iconic episodes. Which I am so eager to get back into. Drop the video a like if you enjoy, subscribe to the channel too, also especially if you want to see more Unlucky Tug content. And let's get back into this. So this is the Unlucky Tugs retrospective on Thomas and Friends season 1.
Dear Christopher,
ooh,
here is your
I'm liking this opening.
Thomas the Tank Engine. He wanted to come out of his station yard and see the world.
Also, that music is familiar. He used it in I've forgotten who it's by, but he used it in his Eppleton Hall video. I looked it up on Spotify actually. It's a really good piece of music. I can't remember who it's from, but
these stories tell you how he did it.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the
Hey, Tug.
first episode of the Thomas Retrospective, the series where I take a thorough look at each of the 25 seasons of Thomas and Friends, the pack mini-season included. 25
Ooh.
installments, which will all eventually lead up to a big finale video where I rank them all. Naturally,
Definitely
this
gonna do
series will
reactions
kick
of that.
off with the one that started it all back in 1984, Season 1. Let's take a trip back in time, shall we?
that windmill shot is incredible. It's still to this day.
We all know the story. Thomas the Tank Engine was based on a book series called the Railway series, which started in
Bit of a history lesson,
1945.
okay.
The Railway series was a series about anthropomorphic trains, written by train enthusiast Reverend Wilbert Awdry. The book series was incredibly popular. In 1953, BBC made the first
Oh, I
ever
remember
attempt to
this.
make a TV series based on them, using 00 scale model trains on sets. The pilot was a total bust.
That's not the actual version, by the way. It's a reenactment. Oh yeah, it says like down at the bottom. That's a reenactment. I'm not sure if you can see that, but that's not the actual thing. That was a reenactment.
As the production was live,
A very
and
good
a train derailed
reenactment.
on camera, messing everything up. An overall failure and an utter embarrassment in Wilbert's eyes. He was
Still can't believe. I still can't believe that like a cameraman thought it was a good idea to put his hand back on the rails. Like, yeah, it was a live production, but come on.
hesitant on a TV adaptation of the books ever happening again. This pilot is believed to have been taped over by BBC, and is thus lost to time. Enter Britt Allcroft. A few decades later, along came a radio and television producer named Britt Allcroft, who had fallen in love with Wilbert's books and saw potential in creating a TV series based off them. She said, and I quote, "It really didn't take me long to become intrigued by the characters, the relationships between them, and the nostalgia they invoked."
That keyword there, kind of nostalgia invoking, because a lot of people kind of what people kind of miss is nostalgic potential. I think that's what a lot of people miss when it comes to making children's shows. Like, kind of, what do you kind of what about these kind of characters will stick with you? Your kind of childhood mind, so you're a bit more kind of open-minded. You're kind of curious. Which of these kind of elements will kind of stick with children, and which they will kind of go back on? Will actually look back on with rose-tinted glasses. So I think nostalgic potential is a very overlooked element in children's storytelling, which, so I'm glad there was clear, she had a clear kind of intention to address that.
After working on a documentary in 1979 on the Bluebell Railway that featured Wilbert, Britt approached him and floated the idea of another run at a TV series. Wilbert was at first hesitant after the 1953 trash fire, but he was eventually convinced. And Britt gained the rights to a television adaptation of the Railway series
Dave
in
Mitton.
1980. She spent 2 years
That's
meeting
funny.
with concept artists and animators, working out what would be the best medium to make the series. At long last, in 1983, production officially started. Britt sought out a film crew.
It does make me interested, though, and I'm going to address this as a kind of question. What do you think Thomas would be like? Like, what do you reckon Thomas would be like if they went for a different animated medium than the model series? Granted, yeah, the model series kind of made it stand out, I feel. And, like, would it be as bad as All Engines Go? Like, what would kind of it being animated, what would that kind of set, like, because they did it with, like, Ivor, the engine, and that was, like, back in the 70s. So would it be something like that, or would it have completely ruined the show entirely? Like, obviously we've seen with All Engines Go that it is, that the 2D animation is kind of ruining it, but the CGI era wasn't that bad. So, like, I want to know your kind of thoughts on kind of what do you reckon would have happened if Thomas was a different production medium rather than live action models?
And contracted a production company called Clearwater Features.
They also
Clearwater
did
was a company that got its start making advertisements for British television, specifically using stop-motion props and models on sets.
What the
head
hell
of
are
Clearwater
those
was
things?
ex-Thunderbirds pyrotechnics expert David Mitton, who came on
Oh yeah, I
as the
forgot
show's
you worked
director,
on Thunderbirds.
and Robert D. Cardona, who came on as producer.
I wonder if I
She-
wonder would I get copyrighted if I did a reaction to Thunderbirds? Like, maybe I'd have to edit it heavily, but I've never actually watched a Thunderbirds episode all the way through. So, like, I wonder, like, because I know there's the new CGI series. I definitely haven't watched
Rounded
that.
up two musical jingle writers
I wonder
named
if I would
Michael
get
O'Donnell
copyrighted for
and
that.
Junior Campbell, who became the show's musical composers.
Absolute legends.
But Britt's biggest score of all was the ex-Beatle himself, Ringo Starr, who came on as the show's narrator. Ringo declined the offer at first, as he was not familiar with the original books, and said himself he didn't think kids would even be interested in trains with things like spaceships and Star Wars around now.
Britt Allcroft, who produced the show, she came up to see me. She had this idea for me
It's
to
such a
narrate these
soothing
children's
voice,
stories.
Ringo Starr. Like, I can
And they're
see,
all about
like, I
this-
can see why Britt chose him, because he's got such a kind of soothing voice. He's got such a
Fabulous
soothing
little
voice.
trains, you know. And I really backed off at the beginning. It was actually a battle at the beginning with Britt Allcroft because I thought it was all Star Wars and space madness. Saying, you know, I'd like you to read these stories about this train. I said, you're going to be crazy. It's Star Wars and madness. We were talking years ago anyway.
But after giving the books a read himself, and after much coaxing from Britt, he eventually gave in.
And so she came back and convinced me. So I said, look, I'll just read 5 of the stories on my own, on tape, and you listen to them and see if you still want me. And she did.
Thomas had gotten celebrity talent right out of the gate. The decision was made to
That is huge celebrity talent, getting freaking one of the Beatles. Like, considering back in the day, like, the Beatles had only recently broken up, so that's huge.
Create the series using models, as the 1953 pilot had done. Except it'd be a much more professional production than that.
He's probably like, to give a kind of sense, he's probably like an equivalent to Justin Timberlake, I think. Maybe I'm just saying that because Justin Timberlake was a member of NSYNC. I'm getting off topic.
Much larger gauge 1-scale model trains on giant sets. The model engines would have working eye mechanisms, so they could move their eyes around and emote, paired with facial expressions that could be swapped out. So you could have Thomas being happy, or mad, or tired, or whatever the scene demanded. The engines had working smoke units too, so they could puff steam as they traveled. The sets were the size of a standard household garage, and weren't the easiest things to film on. Not exactly a cheap production, and Britt herself mortgaged her house to fund the series pilot. A decision that definitely paid off in the end. The initial test pilot was put together in 1983. It has never seen the public light, but it did go over well. ITV loved the pilot pitch and greenlit a season of 26 episodes. The pilot, which was an adaptation of the story Down the Mine, would be refilmed entirely with the rest of Season 1 and became the season's 25th episode. Some shots from this pilot were reused in the final cut, and is the only current footage evidence of it existing. 26 episodes in total were produced, and all were based on existing stories from Wilbur's Railway series. Some of the shorter stories were combined into single episodes to condense the season a bit, and this ultimately worked in their favor, as they managed to cover the first 7.5 books all in this go.
There is one episode where I feel like it doesn't work, and I will kind of get into that a bit later.
Filming lasted 7 months, starting in September 1983, and wrapping in March 1984. Post-production wrapped in April, and on October 9th, 1984, the world was introduced to the Railway series on screen, newly titled Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends.
This theme song, man.
The series was an instant hit, and its popularity spawned 23 more seasons in the years following.
Even if you're not a Thomas fan, you still have to respect the theme song. That is goated, like, as theme song status. Like, even if you don't... Like, I remember, like, I read, like, a few famous musicians have actually... They grew up loving the Thomas the Tank Engine theme, and so taken... That was their kind of one of their inspirations.
But we'll get to those.
The whole shebang.
Thomas is a tank engine who lives at a big station on the island of Sodor.
I think Season 1 is outstanding in a lot of ways. It's a wonderful first impression and introduction to this universe and characters. I think the overall decision for the aesthetic of Season 1, and Thomas in general, was very unique and clever for its time. Character-wise, it was brilliant. Using model props on sets with real steam was nothing new, but it's what they did with it. They crafted different facial expressions so these characters can emote properly.
I think also what adds to the appeal of these is the fact that it is trained. Because when you think about it, like, they're what they effectively are. Like, Hornby was a brand way before this. So if you think about it, these are basically just Hornby trains with extensive pyrotechnics in them. If you think about it, that's effectively what it is.
They gave the props eye mechanisms so they could move their eyes around in a way that gives them some...
To be fair, Bachmann models, they have eye mechanisms. Granted, they can only move from left to right, but...
much more life. If the eyes were just static all the time, they'd just be flat out creepy. By 2022 standards, this method may seem a little dated, especially when their eyes are not moving. Some shots definitely seem eerie
unsettling.
Now.
Unsettling.
Like, oh my god, Toby's staring right into my soul.
God's sake. Stop it. Stop it.
Before the time, this was charming stuff, and I think a lot of it still holds up pretty
I
well.
think, yeah,
It's
it's a very British thing. I feel the charm of it all. I don't know. Like I feel like I don't know. I can't really tell. Like obviously it was a hit with Americans, but I feel because you think about how much children's media was like this back in the day. You think of like the stop motion, like Postman Pat, Fireman Sam, the Clangers, all those kind of things that had this stop motion, that was like stop motion live action models and had these kind of expressive but slightly creepy faces.
certainly makes these characters memorable. I really don't think Thomas would have been such a home run success if the characters' eyes didn't move.
Oh yeah.
The set design is incredibly strong and very unique to Season 1. It's notably different to the rest of the show. Whereas Season 2 onwards tries to go for more industrial and realism, and eventually to a point where they try to make the engine seem as real as possible, Season 1 strides in making everything look more like a storybook world. The simplistic character designs themselves reflect this, all being made up of simple geometric shapes with little riveting detail.
Yeah.
So many sets, like this one of the viaduct, or this one of the junction, or the ever-classic windmill, look like paintings straight out of a children's book, with heavy focus on details in the foreground, like plants growing in swamplands, or someone in a little rowboat fishing, or tire tracks in the snow.
And that's the kind of I remember like Britt Allcroft, that was the kind of feel she was going for. Like she basically just copy and pasted images from the Railway series and just put them into live action, which is you can see the artistic my point is you can see the artistic intention behind Season 1.
There was a level of consideration to the composition of all these shots that made them seem intentionally like moving illustrations, more so than footage. I think this is greatly reinforced by how little the camera actually moves this season. Many of these sets were built to be shot from a single specific angle, and they rarely deter from that. In the next season, we'll start to see a lot more panning shots and dynamic angles. While this season it's a little more rare the camera moves at all. It does sometimes, but not as often as you think. It usually stays very still, to give the illusion that this is indeed an illustration brought to life. And considering these are meant to be straight adaptations of children's books, this choice in aesthetic works very well in its favor. No other seasons after this seem to capture that sense of childlike wonder and bliss as well as Season 1 does. It's pure escapism. Aesthetically, I think Season 1 might be the most appealing season of them all.
I do have a big problem though with the season, and that with like the season aesthetically, and that's the lighting. Why the hell does it look like morning all the time? Seriously, the lighting is just so bright, and it's undersaturated. It's kind of like Season 6 where it was a bit kind of dully lit. That's always been a nitpick with Season 1's aesthetic. Yeah, it's been kind of it's obviously very charming, but at the same time, I do have a massive problem with just how undersaturated the lighting is. Because look at that shot right there. You can still it literally just looks the sky just looks photoshopped. There's only one exception to that, and that is the Flying Kipper episode, but we'll get into that a bit later.
Musically, Season 1 is a real standout as well. It's a very synthy soundtrack, and a soundtrack that is very unlike anything in kid shows at the time. Mike O'Donnell and Junior Campbell understood good music will always be appreciated, and stand the test of time no matter the medium it's presented in.
Yeah, hands down, like, especially Thomas music, like, you remember there's a reason like people like Sudrian Afro and Toby's Windmill are recreating music, this music, because it's just, it stands out. It really stands out. Like, and also because I think one of the things is because it fits the flow of it. I feel you can hear the use of synths. It kind of sounds like puffing sounds. Like it kind of sounds like it's almost like they were using like a scale. What's the kind of scale thing? I'm not entirely sure what that's called, but a kind of scale thing. It's almost like and how that ticks in a way. It's almost like they were using that, but it chuffs. which is so clever. Like the use of like chuffing sounds in the music to kind of fit with the flow and like the vibe of the season. I really like it.
And the themes they created for Thomas are truly iconic. I love how each theme is specifically designed to suit each character. Thomas's theme is very forward-moving and playful, which aligns with his young, impatient character this season. Gordon has a theme that sounds so powerful and grand. Henry's sounds very victorious, reflecting his moments of triumph in various episodes.
I feel like they would get better. The character themes specifically would get a bit better. They just feel a bit stripped down for me in season 1.
James's is very jazzy with some swing to it, etc. It's truly iconic music.
I especially love how in, I think it's like James and the Express, where like it starts out okay, James's theme, but then it starts out and then a bit more kind of jazz. Like I think there's a cymbal and kind of there's a few kind of added elements that make it even more jazzy.
Happy these themes continue to be mainstays in the show as it went on. I honest to God think Thomas would not have had the impact on popular culture that it has if it weren't for its score.
No, hands down.
Season 1, and to a greater extent just Thomas in general, I think also stands out for being so, for lack of a better word, simple.
Oh yeah.
80s kids shows at this time existed to sell toys, so they very much tried to be flashy and advertise their characters as the coolest things ever. Things like He-Man or Thundercats come to mind. Contrast to Thomas, which is a slow, simple show in a very real-world setting.
It would become
told
a
to us
toy
by a
commercial,
chill
though,
narrator who isn't shouting his lines. It's no wonder Thomas was such an instant hit. It was a very different product in a market saturated by high-energy, flashy cartoons. Ringo put it best.
Kids are into dinosaurs with guns on their backs, and spaceships. Yeah. And it was just amazing how big it got.
It's also I'd like to bring up a little bit of a debate here. Because I've mentioned, I'm not sure if I've mentioned this before, but also that kind of slow nature. I'm not sure if he's going to get into this, but I remember Thomas 1, Edward 2, Henry 3 definitely got into this. It's really good for people with on the autistic spectrum, Thomas, like and those with like mental handicaps or just people, because I've definitely mentioned this before, how much slower paced Thomas is, and just how I could get myself immersed in the world. It was such a it didn't, I wasn't distracted really is what I'm trying to say. Like if I grew up with like if I grew up with like any other show, then it would kind of distract my mind a little bit. But Thomas, it focuses, its slower paced nature is much better for kind of someone like me who needs to kind of process things and break it down. So like I feel like that's something important to bring up. Like I'm not sure, I think he will, but honestly I just wanted to kind of get at, that's my view on it as someone who's grown up with a diagnosis of ASD.
Instantly memorable just because it was different. It's a slower show for a slightly younger audience, but at the same time, it didn't talk down to that audience. It didn't make things obvious or ever blatantly state the morals of the stories. Sometimes they'd use more technical dialogue that would be totally lost on kids.
So the feed pipe is blocked, said the inspector. I'll just look in the tanks. The brakes are hauled on. Leak in the pipe, most likely.
Or have little humorous moments that are genuinely funny.
1, 2, 3, push! But he didn't help. My doctor has forbidden me to push, he said. Where's your cow catcher, he asked. But I don't catch cows, sir. Don't be funny. Inspector, can you see fish?
And again, that's why it stood out. It's a kid's show that isn't stupid and treats its young audience with a level of intelligence. Wilbert Audrey put it best when he described his writing style in interviews.
Well, when you're writing a children's book, you're writing for a whole lot of people. You're writing for the unfortunate parents who've got to read it aloud time after time after time after time. You've got to put in little funny bits, subtle bits, which they'll enjoy. And then there's the simple slapstick stuff, which the child will enjoy.
There definitely were other slower shows like Thomas around at this time, especially in England, like Fireman Sam or Postman Pat.
The way he pronounced Fireman Sam, oh my god. Fireman Sam, oh my god.
Thomas managed to stand out from them for having a sort of charm that could be found nowhere else. What I absolutely appreciate the most about Season 1 is its consistency. It's consistent in more ways than you think. It's consistent in tone through and through. It's consistent in its accuracy to the original stories.
That's
it's
true.
consistent in its continuity.
Me, who has never had an accident. On jammed whistles and burst safety valves accidents.
And it's consistent with the placement
My
of
only,
all the
my only
locations.
thing with that is how does he? Percy arrived. Okay, it must have been told. Percy must have been told about it, but the whole burst safety valve. He wasn't there when it happened.
And set throughout the episodes. Like how that one signal box is always right after the junction to the branch line. The viaduct is always before Wellsworth. Maron is always the station on the other side of Gordon's Hill. Except for that one time it wasn't. Whoops, etc. I think it manages this consistency so well because it's not juggling as many elements as later seasons are. It has 7 core characters, 8 books it is adapting.
And that use of location as well, like that gives so much potential for like anyone who possibly sticks with, like, again, like fandoms like that, fandoms like the Thomas fandom probably weren't thought of back then. But I think it gives so much potential for people to explore the lore a bit more. It gives it such a level of lore, especially when you think of Soda but what's it called, like Soda Railways, its history and its people,
And
like
only
that.
a handful of sets. So everything just sort of works because everything is easy to keep track of. Contrast to later seasons where there are so many elements at play, and they just sort of stop caring about the logic of how a character gets from location to location, or if a character is consistent with a previous portrayal.
Hey, that's
By
Sharon Miller's
comparison
fault,
to later
okay?
seasons,
That's Sharon Miller's
Season
fault.
1 is just very well thought out. Let's discuss something. The decision to rebrand the series as Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, instead of keeping the book series' original title. The Railway series was very much an ensemble series, where there wasn't a single main character. Thomas wasn't the main character in the books. There were huge chunks of time where Thomas just wouldn't appear at all. But he was definitely the most popular. And I think Britt's decision to market the show
Of course,
around
'cause
him
he's got
versus
the number
everyone was a smart one. Thomas is the most relatable character to the target audience. He is young, impatient, and has desires that the kids watching also want. He wants to please his guardian figure. He wants reward. He wants to go out and see the world around him.
I'm tired of pushing coaches. I want to see the world.
Hell, even the book publishers knew this too, as later Railway series publicity releases would title their stuff as Thomas, even before the show was a thing. Britt knew that kids would find a show simply called Thomas more approachable than something cold and vague like the Railway series. I mean, think about it. Suppose you had never read or heard of the book series at all, and then read that name. What does the Railway series mean? Is it a book series for kids about trains, or is it a bunch of old tapes for railway historians?
That's fair.
There's no implication
It's
the
more
engines
direct.
are even sentient. A character name, like Thomas, implies friendliness and warmness. A character.
Granted, that does kind of work. That does kind of work both. It does kind of work both ways, because if you think about other other shows like Tugs and also My Little Pony as well, all those kind of different ones who have implications that they are ensemble series. They have a dedicated main character. They do have a dedicated main character.
They wanted the show to be as much about the characters themselves as it was about the mechanics of how trains worked. And that's where Thomas got things right. It successfully rode that line. It was a show about friendly, happy characters, but it was also a show
The eye
about
rolls are
real
so
trains, doing real train things. The title, Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, is much more successful in directly conveying what the show is. You could never have heard about the show before and know exactly what it's about just by reading the title. You got Thomas, which is a friendly kid character name, which implies, okay, this is about a sentient character. Then you got the Tank Engine. Okay, so you know it's about trains. And then and friends, which implies the show is not only about Thomas. There's more of a fun cast to meet.
Yeah.
Thomas won't be the central character all the time.
It's a little bit
What's
cringy,
in a name,
but at the same
right?
time,
Speaking of characters, let's talk about them.
hey. Who did stuff
Season
this
1
year?
is very much a standalone season. As in, you can watch it, and by the end of it, it feels conclusive and you feel satisfied as a viewer. In the same way something like Star Wars: A New Hope works as a standalone movie separate from the rest of the franchise, Season 1 of Thomas does too. Every character is in a different place at the end than they were at the beginning. Everything wraps up so nicely.
Those
Every
eyes.
character has an
Is
arc.
no one going to
Some-
mention those lights in the back? Like, hang on. I've mentioned this before. Look at those two eyes. Look at them.
Everything wraps up so nicely. Every character has an arc, some more in-depth than others,
Granted,
but
yeah.
they all have one. Edward's arc, for instance, is one of the more simplistic ones, and completes in the span of a single episode. He proves he isn't a worthless old engine and shows up the bigger engines that belittled him, and then continues to do this as the season goes on. Whereas someone like Henry has an entire character journey over the
I
whole
do like
season.
how drawn out Edward's character arc is. Like, granted, that's kind of like how the Railway series was functioning, but at the same time, I do like how it spans over season 1 and season 2. Like, it's not just
Starting as very selfish and ending being one of the more sympathetic and victorious of the fleet. Whether they have a complex arc or not, by the end of the season you do feel like you really know each character. Toby, who appears in 4 episodes total and speaks in only 3 of them, feels like a main character by the season's end. And I think that comes down to Audrey being a genius writer in brevity more than anything. All it takes is for a single story focused on each character alone for you to totally know what each one is all about. Thomas and Gordon have very noteworthy arcs, and this is something I never see anyone talk about. I can say with confidence that Thomas and Gordon were the main characters of Season 1. This was their season. Thomas
I
and
wish
Gordon
their
have a
relationship,
rivalry
their
that
friendship
starts
was
in the
explored a
very
bit
first
more.
episode.
Like it is kind of in like, especially in the classic series, but I wish they're kind of, because especially when you look at the CGI series, there's still that kind of talking down sense to it, and like there's no there's no dynamic character, there's no dynamic relationship. I feel like as far as the CGI, especially like as far as the CGI season is concerned. Like it seems like Edward is always the bridge between. I get it's because they're trying to like find stuff for Edward like as the bridge between both of them, but at the same time I feel like you could like explore their relationship a bit further.
Aptly titled Thomas and Gordon. Thomas is a cheeky little shithead, and Gordon is pompous and self-important. Their journeys come full circle as they both have incidents separate from each other that humble them. Thomas gets stuck in the snow. Gordon loses the express to James. Thomas leaves his guard behind. Gordon bursts his whistle. Thomas gets fish in his tanks. Gordon runs into a ditch. This all comes to a beautiful close in the second to last episode, Down the Mine, where Gordon and Thomas grow so much as characters that they finally decide to put their differences aside.
Shall we form an alliance? You help me, and I'll
That's what
help
I'm
you.
saying.
Thomas and Gordon hate
That's
each
what I'm
other in
saying.
the very first episode, and by the end of
Explore
the
it
season,
in other
they have formed an
seasons.
alliance.
I
And
get it
travel
is
off
a
together into
standalone
the
season. I
sunset.
get it, but at the same time,
Down the Mine is the
I can't-
spiritual finale
I
to
can't
season
unsee
1, in my
the other
opinion,
seasons not
showing the
exploring
end
the
of the show's
potential.
two main
like I can't see the other series not exploring the potential of this relationship.
characters introduced at the very beginning.
But then again,
As
we're
much as
here
I
for
love
season
the
1,
trend
so-
of ending every season with a Christmas episode, this scene here really feels like a proper end.
And buffer to buffer, the Allies puffed home.
I love the Fat Controller waving them off. I really like that. Like he's a proud man there.
I think the MVP of season 1 was definitely Henry.
It
He
has
goes
to be
through
Henry.
quite a
It has to be
trial
Henry.
and has the most interesting character journey. He's the most
He's the
changed
true
at the end of
underdog.
the season out of everyone. He starts as a rude, stuck-up curmudgeon, then a nice
Curmudgeon.
redemption story that makes the audience like him, another fall, but this time a very sympathetic one, and he came out of that victorious in the end. He even gets rebuilt into a much bigger, stronger engine, symbolizing rebirth, if you will. Most of Henry's best episodes come from Season 1, the Flying Kipper, of course, but also ones like Whistles and Sneezes, where he finally gets that one-up on Gordon, and the ever-famous sad story of Henry, where he gets locked up in a tunnel forever and dies of starvation, and we never see him again. That's what happened in this episode, right?
Clickbait!
Henry feels like a totally different character by the end of this season compared to where he started, and that's why I think he deserves the award for season's MVP. Thomas alone definitely deserves a mention too. I was this close to giving the MVP award to him because it's Thomas. It's his show. Feels wrong to not give it to him in the first season. Thomas has some wonderful character growth this season. Starting out as the little shithead he was in Thomas and Gordon,
At the same
and
time,
showing real
though,
development through episode.
At the same time, though, it's this kind of thing that makes me realize Thomas is not going to win it for any other season, because basically his full arc is that he's a Shanta, he gets his branch line, like. But I'm just imagining, what if they made Thomas and the Breakdown Train the final episode of that season? How would that change things?
It's like Breakdown Train, where he rescues James at a moment's notice and is gifted his
Granted,
branch
it would
line.
throw the whole
Thomas's
railway
arc is
series
a much
lore,
larger,
like, out of hand,
ongoing one, though.
But I
that's
meant
worth
kind of
discussing
if
at a
Audrey had
later
written
time.
it in that way.
But I think the season ended at a
Maybe.
good place for him, where it feels conclusive. So we'll let Henry have this one.
Hurrah! Cried Henry.
That
Well
will be
done,
nice.
Henry. You deserve it, champ. Let's move on to the season's standout episodes.
I did it.
Season
Here we
1
go.
had a wonderful array of stories. All of our main characters get spotlight episodes. Some lucky few get several. Thomas comes in on top with a grand total of 11 lead roles, Gordon in second with 6, and Henry in third with 5. I'd argue that every episode this season is memorable for one reason or another, but which is truly the standout?
There's only one for me.
I think this season's best episode award
Come
goes
on.
to the surprise of no one,
No.
The Flying Kipper.
There we freaking
This
go.
is the one that is tonally very different from everything else, taking place in a snowy countryside.
That's what I'm saying. That's my point I made about the lighting earlier. This is the one episode where we don't have that kind of... Yeah, granted, near the end of the episode, it goes to kind of day again. But this is the one episode which I feel has a completely different atmosphere. And again, like tonally different, as you said.
At dawn, alongside a very beautiful score. A completely new type of atmosphere that we hadn't seen in the show prior to this, or really since. Visuals wise, the ones in this episode are undoubtedly the most striking of the season.
Yeah.
It notably has the first big crash of the series too, which is treated with total seriousness. After the crash, there's a moment of silence for the audience to take in what just happened. It's a very mature moment, and I'm really glad it's not sugar-coated. Notably, the original story plays this crash off in a light-hearted, almost goofy manner, having the guard of the van Henry crashed into complaining about Henry making him spill his cocoa or whatever. I heavily respect Britt and David for removing that silliness of this scene entirely and playing it completely straight. It's so much more adult and impactful this way. One of the few rare examples.
I'm trying to save my thoughts for this episode for Tanky's react. I'm trying to save my thoughts for this episode when Daylight, take your time, buddy. But if you eventually get around to this, I'm saving my thoughts for this episode for
where
you.
the adaptation is better than the original story. It's a no-brainer why this one deserves the Best Episode award. Possibly an unpopular opinion, but I think Toby and the Stout Gentleman deserves an honorable mention as well.
A lot of people
for
like
it's
that
the only
episode.
ep this
I know a
season
lot
to
of people
take
that like
place
that episode.
outside of the main railway and established characters, and instead follows a single new character that we've never met before. While Kipper is the definite standout, I think the episode that best sums up what Season 1 is all about is Thomas and Birdie. An absolute
Really?
classic, of course.
Oh, yeah.
All the elements that make Season 1 special are present here. A simple story with fun characters, a poppin' soundtrack, consistency all around with the placement of locations, all of which are so aesthetically pleasing and look like
Damn
paintings.
it! Oh
This
damn
episode-
it! My hand was out of shot. I was trying to time it with the toot toot and the score. Oh, damn it! My
Have
hand
it
was out
all.
of shot.
Thomas and Birdie is Season 1 incarnate. In terms of the worst episode this season, that's kind of hard to say. I enjoy every episode in Season 1, and I don't think any of them are bad. A lot of people say Thomas and the Guard is the weakest one, because not a lot happens in it. And I guess I would agree with that. It's not a bad episode by any means. It's simple by design, because its purpose is to introduce the audience to how Thomas's branch line works. This is the first ever episode to take place on it. But yeah, not much of an engaging story here. Thomas leaves the guard behind because of impatience. He says sorry, the guard says it's okay, and then the story ends. Not a lot going on. It doesn't really contribute that much to the overall plot of the season. But I'm actually going to go out on a limb here and say the one episode this season that doesn't fully work for me is Thomas's Christmas Party. It's a nice all the characters are together celebratory finale episode, but it sort of feels like a part 2 to a part 1 we never got. They mention events from a story that never happened on screen. I remember seeing this flashback scene as a kid and thinking I missed an episode or something. Overall, just feels kind of out of place, and was only made to have a Christmas story to end the season on. I like that tradition, and I like the episode, don't get me wrong.
Like Christopher Audrey is a good writer. Like, I think he's made some very, very good stories, but at the same time, he was under a lot of rushed scenarios, I think. And like he stated, like a few of his stories he made are very rushed just to fit in with the series.
It's a very sweet story, but personally, I think Paint Pots and Queens from Gordon's book would have been a much better all the characters together celebratory finale than this, and would have been a much better bookend to Thomas and Gordon's characters arc this season.
I don't know why they continued it after.
The word I would use to describe season 1 is complete. Season 1 is a very complete season. As in, if you decided to stop watching the show here, you'd be pretty satisfied. Every major character has an arc, and all the stories build upon each other and conclude nicely. It's a season where watching the episodes in order actually matters. There is progression to the overall plot and these characters' growths. And thus, I think this season is slightly underrated, as I feel people sort of write season 1 off as boring in comparison to the more exciting stuff later on. Yes, it is a slower, simpler season than most, but season 1 has such a unique charm on its own that no other season has, that I can't possibly say it's boring. This is Thomas the Tank Engine in its purest form. The raw, untampered, uncompromised original vision of what the show is.
I think that's really key.
It is wonderful.
Just kind of
I think
the whole, if you want to kind of make it as simplistic and as close to the Railway series as possible, then they did accomplish that with
most of us think about showing Thomas to someone who's never seen it before. Our first instinct is to show them really bold and adventurous episodes of the later seasons, like Toby and the Flood, or
bold episodes, yeah, like kind of more mature episodes. I
Escape, or Duncan Gets Spooked or something. All of which are fantastic episodes, don't get me wrong. Hell, I recommended these. But if you want someone to understand why Thomas has this following that it does, why it's something so special, show them season 1 in its entirety, and they'll get it.
It's something
season
you need
1
to
has
see,
it all.
I reckon.
If you want
to kind of get a feel of Thomas, it's a necessary season, I think is what he's trying. It's definitely what I'm trying to say. It's a necessary season, especially for me.
First impression into this universe, and it ends in a conclusive, satisfying way, yet leaves the viewer wanting more. And boy,
do we get
will
more.
They get more. But I shan't say any more,
or I will spoil
the next
story. That's so clever. I love that. I freaking love that. Oh boy.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed the first episode of the Thomas Retrospective. I'm still working out a formula for this series, so please tell me what you'd like to see in the next installment. We got 24 more episodes to try new stuff still. Once again, if you are interested, I do have a Patreon open now. If you choose to pledge, you will get special perks such as early access to videos, and get your names in the credits of every new video, just like the ones you see on screen right now. My patrons also get to vote on what the next video topic is about. Your input decides what comes next. Click the link in the description, take a read through the tier options, and pledge if you'd like. Appreciate the support as always, everyone. See you all in the next one.
Okay, that outro is a little bit long, I'm not gonna lie. Okay, so that was his season 1 retrospective, and I don't disagree with him on certain elements, but I think one of the things is, it's one thing that's still kind of bugging me is the fact that kind of they used Railway Series stories in like all of the episodes are Railway Series stories. The whole point of it is to bring the Railway Series to life. So like granted there is choice about kind of what episodes you include and what episodes you don't include. But at the same time the whole kind of arc and story, yeah, like I said, it's determined by kind of what order you put it in. But at the same time, it's still the railways. It's still the Reverend Audrey's writing, and I'm not saying that's a flaw because it's meant to be a kind of it's meant to be bringing the Railway series in real life and kind of if it was to be kind of this moving picture as we kind of imagine when we just look at the books, especially like considering a modern audience, we need to kind of see things, more kind of moving images. But there's more of that kind of demand to see something move rather than just seeing stationary pictures. Like we still love books and we still love like art and stuff like that, but at the same time that's kind of the intention of season 1 is to bring it to life. And I really like his point at the end there when he kind of says that it's the rawest you can get in terms of Thomas. It's the rawest it's the rawest interpretation of the Railway series, like and in really the purest in a way. Like just again, like I still have a problem with like the actual technical. I feel the technical side does make it a little bit more incomplete, but at the same time I think I definitely agree with him in how you kind of it's stripped back, it's slow, and it's basically what you need it's what the Reverend like. I wouldn't be surprised if this was his favorite season, if I'm totally honest, for just how reminiscent it was. Like granted Thomas did have to go somewhere in order to kind of stay relevant. He had to try things new, but I'm fond of this season. I am fond of this season. I'm very fond of it. But at the same time I think it leaves space for it to grow. Certainly, it was like again that kind of it has a complete arc. The season has an arc, but at the same time, it leaves us wanting more. There's more lore to explore, more characters, more atmosphere, more locations. There's more which you can do with it, which I think season 2 does. But like he said, that's a story for another day. So, thank you. That was a very interesting video, certainly, and I'm so glad to be reacting to Unlucky Tug again because he is such a good YouTuber, man. Like, just his point is just how he manages to engage you with what he's talking. Like, he's got such a good narration voice, certainly, and just how he manages to find like something new to say about every season that hasn't already been said before. It's just. It's a talent, really. It's incredible talent, and to do that with like the impressive editing, like all of that, he's got a golden combination here, and it's no surprise that he started doing YouTube full time now, considering what he's doing are Thomas videos. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. That was a very fun video to react to, and I hope you guys enjoy it as well. So. This is Relatable speaking. Like I said, drop the video a like if you enjoyed, subscribe to the channel too, and I'll see you guys next time.